Let's talk about innovation. Tell a little story. In the podcasting world, which you might have heard me talk about before, there's this open source movement called Podcasting 2.0. You can loosely think of it as similar to WordPress.org and the WordPress community and core contributors, wherein in podcasting, there is something called the RSS feed. Those of you that have been around long enough know that used to be a way to read websites. Still is. But it is also the heartbeat of open podcasting. In other words, I can create a podcast. An RSS feed will allow me to distribute that information, show notes, show titles, artwork, the podcast episode itself, to anyone with a podcast app. Traditionally, these RSS feeds are distributed through places like Apple, Spotify. Now YouTube is trying to get into the mix. The Podcast Index, which you can find at podcastindex.org. Welcome, or in comes the Podcasting 2.0 project. And like WordPress, it's a community of folks who come together and try to enhance the RSS feed. It's a way of saying, like, hey, WordPress is open source, like this collection of code and ideas is open source. RSS feed is open, and you can enhance it. And much like WordPress, you can write a open source plugin, and if somebody uses it, then your open source code, your idea, begins to, weave its way through the web. The more cool things you make in open source with plugins and themes or core contributions to WordPress, the more people adopt it, the more it becomes like a standard or a way that people are just like, I must run my WordPress site with your plugin or theme. And the Podcasting 2.0 folks do this with the RSS feed, and they enhance the RSS feed by things called tags. It's a very basic, fundamental feature of RSS. When you look at an RSS feed, you look at it and it says, okay, here's the show title. When we're talking specifically about podcasting, it says, here's the show title, here's the description, the show notes, here's where the file is located, here's the cover art, the link to the cover art. These tags sort of tell RSS readers and podcast directories and podcast apps, here's some information, here's where it goes. And the Podcasting 2.0 initiative, much, much smaller than WordPress.org, has been innovating on this RSS feed for many years at this point, 3, 4, 5, 6 even. And one of the crowning achievements is Apple's adoption of the Podcasting 2.0 transcript tag. And most recently, Spotify announced that it too is going to use the transcript tag. So where am I going with this? I'm going in a direction of innovation and how open source is great for innovation. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of time and a lot of effort. And in the case of the Podcasting 2.0 stuff, this is, by all measures, a tiny, tiny piece of code. Like, tiny. It doesn't even exist on, a GitHub repo of committed lines. We're talking about something that just says, here is the place where a transcript file goes. In fact, here's the link to the transcript file. Now the app has to do something with it, right? This is tiny. But in the case of WordPress, generally, that open source code is magnitudes larger, right? Just by the nature of design, really. I mean, it's WordPress. It's a website app helping you publish stuff on the web. I mean, it just does a lot more. But the essence of innovating is something that is super important to WordPress. And it is something that I am keeping a critical eye on. I'm a day-ish away from interviewing some of the folks from this new FAIR project. And, I think from an innovation standpoint, okay, the tech is innovative. Okay, we are going to have, or allegedly, if people adopt it and want to use it, much like the Podcasting 2.0 stuff, then we will have a new, I'll use this term loosely, a new standard of distributing plugins and themes. It's going to be still a continued uphill battle of finding people who want to leverage it, support it, actually use it on their WordPress sites. It's something that's still going to have a tremendous amount of effort, or require a tremendous amount of effort to, fully permeate the WordPress ecosystem and install base. But innovation is something that I think WordPress is really lacking right now. Not just because of the automatic versus WP engine stuff, but that certainly has, and will continue to impact the innovation of WordPress. And back to the FAIR project for a second, yes, I am excited to have this technical layer that, again, from a technical standpoint, says, okay, there is not just one place that WordPress can get software, plugins and themes, or whatever comes next. There's not just one place that if it fails, if the server fails, then you're not getting your updates or your software updates. It is interesting to have this network of servers under, I will asterisk this because I still don't clearly know, but under the guidance of the Linux Foundation / the FAIR governing body. I'll find out more when I have my interview. Yes, this is all great stuff. But I am truly worried about where we're finding this innovation that pushes the adoption of WordPress forward, where WordPress continues to evolve, and end users and developers and implementers all want to use this software still. Again, I don't want to throw AI into the mix of everything, but this is the times. Everything I'm building with AI, I'm not going to overhype it. Yes, it is powerful stuff. I mean, I'm doing things I could never do, for sure. But I'm starting to hit that ceiling with a lot of the more advanced projects that I'm working on as just a power user. But as that continues to evolve and innovate, folks like me that do have technical understanding, some marketing chops, at least in the next year or so, we'll be able to build some cool things, market it, and build little innovative projects, which I think will also take away from, WordPress as that hammer that sees all nails. You might find somebody who has built a business on building business directories or bespoke little apps with WordPress, and you find dozens of those people or hundreds of those types of people that have built a little business or added that to their tool set when they're working with customers. You might be talking about tens and thousands or tens of thousands of sites that no longer go online anymore because that mold that they were trying to use, that is now replaced by, let me just boot up Replit and build this app right here, and I don't need the overhead of WordPress. I'll just build it with whatever Replit gives me. I'm not saying that is the best model, but it's a model, and I think it's an increasingly worrisome model that is happening. It's the no-code revolution on steroids, really. So how does WordPress continue to innovate? And while I do support the idea of FAIR, and I I think it makes total sense on paper. What I'm curious about from you, if you're still in the WordPress land listening to this, is how you think this impacts the longer road ahead, right? If Matt and Automatic decide to innovate with WordPress in some way, and I'll paint that picture in a moment, what I think it is, then what does that mean for anybody using the FAIR project? The concept of themes and plugins in the age of AI, how long do we expect that to last? Again, in the age of AI. And one of the things that I'm really curious about, and I think we should all pay attention to, of course, is this new Make AI team, if I'm using that vernacular correctly, is watching like what they do and how they innovate. And the curious part, which I asked Matt many months ago at the infamous WordCamp, I asked him at a dinner that we were at, like, why haven't I heard you, talk about AI that much? And in the sense of, like, why haven't I heard you talk about open source AI? Why hasn't, again, WordPress at that time made any strides to align with open source AI? Because I have a cautious eye over, like, where does Automatic see WordPress, in the future, and where does it align with AI? Because I think what we have is this big fight upon us, again, for the same fight we've always had for, like, the open web, neutrality of data, ownership of data, now just getting 100x'd again by these AI platforms that will, you can own, if you want the best AI, you must tie into, just as an example, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. These are all owned entities. These are all closed-sourced AI models. And where does, for the last 20 years, the flag that WordPress had always flown was open source, the freedoms, et cetera, et cetera. So where does that put WordPress in alignment with open source AI? And at that real quick meeting and quick Q&A that he gave at this dinner, he just kind of said, in a sort of passing manner, that there's no way that Automatic could compete with running their own LLM, cost-wise, infrastructure-wise. Same thing with the open source models. Hey, these are great. They require a ton of resources and hardware, which these other closed source platforms just have. So he said he sees a world where WordPress just works with any LLM that somebody could bring. Now remember, this is back in August, September, whenever that WordCamp was. So a lot has changed in the AI space. A lot has changed for Automatic. So where does that align? Where does that innovation of WordPress align when it comes to AI? And if the future of developing software, code, your website is through a human spoken or written prompt, in other words, plain English turns into code, and if that is the norm, how does WordPress fare, no pun intended, when it comes to downloading, installing themes and plugins, right? Customize or site editor settings, or customizer settings, Does WordPress get left behind, I should say, in the innovation arena, because all of the internet becomes just, hey, let me prompt this thing and then give it to me and output it, and then that's my website, right? I want to build a 5-page website for my logo. Here's, branded around my logo. My business is a plumbing business. Here's my small little bio. Build me a website for this. I charge $150 an hour. Build a pricing table. and it just goes and does it. And it does it perfectly. Not like how it does it now, which is imperfectly. So as humans, and especially developers coming up in the age of AI, are more exposed to like building and developing that way, WordPress already has a stigma of being old. Do we lose that ability to attract folks and ultimately having WordPress thrive because we're simply not keeping up? That argument is already made. That argument was already made like 8 years ago, right? And it was an argument made 8 years ago based on the numbers, like whatever they were arguing for back then about WordPress being slow, lethargic, and not keeping up, obviously didn't really make out, that particular vision. But this AI stuff seems a little bit more scary, in my opinion. This is all conjecture. This is all just theory. I would love your response on that. But while I love the idea of FAIR and what it does, I am so, opinionated. I am so bullish on innovation right now for WordPress that I want to hear from Automatic, from WooCommerce, from this Make AI team, from other leading leaders in the WordPress space, and especially FAIR. How does this innovate? How does this innovate WordPress and push it forward? A federated network of servers that help distribute plugins and themes makes sense in 2024, 2025. But will themes and plugins be distributed through servers in zip packages as they are today in 2 to 3 years? Or does the user and does Automatic and does WordPress evolve into a way where if you want a plugin, you just request it through a prompt because that's what everybody expects. And you're either going to get this search result through a prompt. Please install an e-commerce plugin. Please install a contact form plugin and put it on 5 pages of my website and include these 8 fields. And then it goes and it just does it. And it either builds the code or says, hey, would you like to use Jetpack forms or Gravity forms? And is that a service that is so compelling to an end user that just the idea of distributing packages evaporates?